than I have ever been, there's probably more of an actual money exchange that still goes on when people get married. Like you might actually have, parents giving their children however much money when they get married. I think a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people work that into their wills or whatever. But for the rest of us, the plebeians down here in the trenches, it's wild to think that whereas like, especially for the upper classes, marriage used to be a way of passing your money on to your children and grandchildren and a
Mm-hmm.
way of, paying somebody to take your daughter off your hands. Um,
Yep.
Instead of like making that giant monetary gift, now a lot of parents put a lot of money into their children's weddings.
Mm-hmm.
So like it's not actually going anywhere. That money isn't actually doing anything for you in the future, but it's still continuing that like let me dump a whole bunch of money into this tradition, which is very weird. Like,
Right.
cause why?
And it's super weird. And I watched a wedding movie the other day and totally caught myself fantasizing about like I have an adult daughter and like what her wedding's going to look like. And I'm like, wait, no, I don't believe in this. Like
Oh my
this
God. But Lenny, it goes right back to Disney. And like
yeah.
it's the fairy tale ending, right? Like it has to be beautiful and just like you want it. It has to be an expression of who you are as an individual. There's so much pressure on it, and I really think that it comes back to this idea that like the happy ending of your life is encapsulated in this perfect moment where you're marrying your prince on the bow of a ship as the sun sets or whatever,
Yeah.
whatever your
Or
perfect thing
someone's
is.
prince.
Yeah.
If you're Vanessa, someone's prince.
Like it it has been like the idea of getting married has been marketed to women for at least the last 70 years. And I think probably even before that, to like maybe a lesser degree to the mainstream,
Mm-hmm.
but like it has been marketed to us as the thing that will make us whole.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, the wedding must be perfect
Yeah.
because reasons that don't actually make sense if you think them through. Um,
Well, because that's how you legitimize your relationship, no matter how good or bad it is.
okay, and can we talk for a moment? This is something like I was literally working on something completely different the other day, and this idea just popped into my head, and I hadn't really thought of it in this exact way before. So, for women, getting married is the thing that you do. And a lot of the reason for that, I believe, is because for women and women only, for hundreds of years in the dominant culture that came to us from Europe, which more or less came from Rome way back in the day, the dominant culture has been telling women that the only way that you get to have sex is if you are married.
Mm-hmm.
Because as we have more or less established, and we could probably do an entire episode on specifically, marriage is the way that men have gained control over women's ability to make babies.
Right.
And then I believe that very strongly. That's the only reason that it exists. That we pair women off with men so that that man can then control their reproductive ability. But
Although the best description for why men prefer to marry virgins, what we do in the shadows, he's like, well, why do you prefer virgins? Well, if somebody gave you a sandwich, wouldn't you prefer that he hadn't fucked it first?
I mean, yeah, I see that point. Okay.
Yeah. Which, it's hilarious. But like the idea of rigidity, yeah, totally what you said. It comes down to control, and it comes down to it became just another way to be shitty to women. To kill them, to get rid of them, to, justify like not loving them, things like that.
It really is such a weird thing though. Like, so okay, controlling women's ability to make babies by telling them that they cannot have sex until marriage, which really only applies to women and only ever has applied to women because men have always been expected to have sex before marriage and to have extramarital sex during marriage. Like it's Just that's how it's always been. We control women's bodies through marriage with the idea that it's a legitimacy thing, right? Like that you have to own this woman's body through marriage so that you know that the children that she bears are yours. And the question that I have is like, why is that so important? Like, is it really necessary that a child bear your blood for you to give that child your attention and eventually your money and your resources? There's so much emphasis placed on the bloodline thing, right? Like you have to know that this is your child or else you won't love it, or you won't take care of it, or you can't pass on your whatever, your old pocket watch, to someone who's not really your child.
Yeah.
And
your
like midichlorians,
that,
yeah. You can't
so
pass on the force to some random child. But like, I feel like I can see an argument for that line of thinking in that like there may be some very deep evolutionary like tendency to love our own children more than other people's children, maybe. But I really kind of feel like it's at least in practice, the idea that like the children must be yours to be legitimate and therefore to receive whatever, be a member of the family, feels very much more like just another, like just controlling a woman's body. Like just being able to be like, you can't let anybody else put his pee-pee in there.
I mean, like I said, I have a son that doesn't have a father now. It's just mine. He's my immaculate conception. Haha, joke's on you, the courts. You made me into a Madonna.
That's pretty awesome.
But the point was to control me, right? To control, like, to make sure that I wasn't going to have any children with another man other than my husband. Like, that's what it came down to, is controlling me.
And I really do believe that a lot of the ways that Western culture has developed is basically a reaction to cisgender men being terrified of women's ability to make babies inside of themselves and feeling like they must do anything and everything that they possibly can to control that. And I feel like most of history, especially from the Roman Republic onward through Europe and now into America, like that culture is based on women like being subjugated because men are deeply jealous and afraid of what we can do with our bodies.
I mean, if we don't need men to help us make babies, if we could just like be off making babies, all the power leaves the men and it's chaos.
Yeah, total chaos, because we couldn't possibly just exist in any kind of egalitarian situation, obviously. It's never been done. It has never happened in the history of all humanity, ever.
Yeah, definitely not in America before, colonists came over.
Totally not. But no, like I've thought about it a lot. And, granted, I am like a raging, rampant feminist, and I'm queer. And, we haven't even gone into like non-heterosexual marriage and that whole thing. I'm going to take like a very little detour because we definitely don't have time to really dig into it right now. But one of the other questions that I wrote in my notes going into this episode was, gay marriage / marriage equality. And the question is, for real though, why not? Like what is the problem? Is it just that if we let people who aren't cisgender men and cisgender women get married, that they won't have babies and then therefore we won't be able to outbreed our competitors? Is it just that we're like really squicked out by that? Like,
both of those reasons have been an argument for it. What it comes down to is when we've attributed social status and power to this specific heteronormative coupledom is what I called it earlier. Everything is like based off of this. Like that's one of the ways that people are able to keep their power. Nobody wants to give up power. It gives them power over the women who are left reckoning with the fact that their social status, their human value, and their basic survival is like contingent on men. Right. Men are afraid to be able to lose control over that, like, is what it comes down to. And if you allow same-sex marriages, you are like breaking this idea that this specific type of marriage works, even though statistics say that this type of marriage doesn't work.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah, actually, that's a really good point. Like, if we go back to the idea that, like, the nuclear family is an idea that was really, like, forced into reality, you know, and enforced as the way to control the masses in social order, then I guess queer marriages, they go directly against that. And I also, like, like, two women having a happy life together, which, by the way, has happened all the time in every society ever, like, just without the blessing of marriage in a lot of cases, without the sacrament of marriage, as they say. That shows that women can be happy and productive and healthy members of society on their own, and that disrupts everything. Like, I've thought about this quite a lot as somebody who is in my mid to late 30s at this point, who has not had children yet, and doesn't plan to have children. I have seen the ways that friends of mine who I've known for a long time, when they had children, became better consumers. Because, like, whereas, you know, I am living with a partner in a heteronormative looking, but not in reality, relationship. But because it's just the two of us and our cat, like, we didn't get a new car. We have a crappy old car that could break down at any time because we're not putting anybody but ourselves in danger by driving it. You know, like, we are not willing to go into debt to get ourselves a fancy new car like a lot of people might be when they have children. I started realizing, like, the differences between my life and a lot of the people who I know who have children's lives is that they were, again, sweeping generalization, I know this is not true of everybody, but many of them were much more willing to adopt the nuclear family, you know, 1.5 children and a dog, white picket fence life, because it did feel secure and it did feel like they were providing the best life for their children in a way that they would not necessarily have done if it was just them. And this, people go into debt for it, you know, so they can have the safe car, they can send their kid to the right school, they can do all of the right things that you do when you have a child who you love, who you want to provide these things for. And I think that queer marriages and queer relationships really are upsetting to the consumerist social order in that way, which isn't to say that queer people can't have kids, because lots of them do now, and that's, like, getting more and more prevalent in our culture.
Or don't pay thousands of dollars for weddings.
True. That's not spending the equivalent of, like, 5 houses on a wedding over the course of our lives. Like, yeah, it really, like, you know, you can save a lot of money by not having kids, and a lot of people who are in queer relationships don't end up having kids unless they really decide to and make a commitment to it. And I think that that is
that true?
Well, I think it's not as true now as it used to be.
I mean, I'm still driving around my crap car, even though I have children.
I said it was a sweeping generalization.
Because I don't want to. Because I don't want to put myself into debt buying a car. I don't want to make payments on crap, and so I buy crap.
Me too.
Yeah, as cheap as I could get it, because I have kids, and because they are expensive, and because is exactly what you said, that we are now, like, needing to consume all kinds of other things. I mean, we live in a giant 2-story house in the middle of the city here. I mean, the electricity payments on this house are $250 a month.
Wow.
Just because we have kids. Like, I'm willing to pay that. People are willing to pay so much more for things just because they have children, and you're absolutely right there.
Yeah, and that's not a bad thing. I mean, like, you love your children. You want to take the best care of your children. That's great. Like, I am in no way impugning anyone who does that.
But it's still killing the environment. Like, every cell phone, every tablet, every computer, every TV that you own, not only, like, affects Indigenous people specifically, and I think about this, like, every time, like, I have to buy like a laptop so my kids could go to online school, things like that.
Yeah.
That these purchases not only affect